right now as you lie here, as your body settles into the mattress and your breathing begins to slow, and the world outside your room fades to a murmur, there is something inside you that should not be there. Something that evolution, the most relentless editor in the history of life, has been trying to remove from your body for millions of years. And it failed. Evolution took away your tail. It stripped the thick fur that once covered every inch of your ancestors' skin. It shortened your jaw, flattened your face, restructured your feet, reshaped your spine, rewired your throat for speech, and redesigned nearly every system in your body across hundreds of thousands of generations. Evolution is not sentimental. It does not keep things because they are familiar. It does not hold on to features out of nostalgia or habit. If something is not useful, if it costs energy to maintain and provides no benefit in return, evolution removes it. Slowly, quietly, across millennia, it edits the organism until every remaining feature earns its place. And yet, there is something in your body right now that evolution should have deleted long ago. Something that every medical textbook for over a century dismissed as useless, a leftover, a relic, a biological fossil from an ancient chapter of our history that no longer applies. Doctors removed it routinely. Scientists pointed to it as proof that the human body is an imperfect machine carrying the baggage of its past. Darwin himself listed it among the vestiges of our animal ancestry, structures that had outlived their purpose and were slowly being erased by the indifferent hand of natural selection. And for 150 years, nobody questioned this. It was settled science. It was obvious. It was wrong. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, I am going to tell you the story of this feature, the story of what it actually does, which turns out to be far more important and far more extraordinary than anyone imagined. The story of why evolution kept it when it threw away so many other things, and the story of the scientists who spent decades arguing about it, dismissing it, removing it from hundreds of millions of human bodies, before finally, astonishingly, discovering that they had been making a terrible mistake. This is a story about your body, about the deep history written in your flesh and bones, about the ancient past that you carry with you everywhere you go without knowing it. And it begins not with humans, not with primates, not even with mammals, but with a fish. A fish that crawled out of the water 375 million years ago and changed the history of life on Earth. Let your shoulders relax, let your jaw unclench, let the weight of the day dissolve into the surface beneath you. The story is long, and the night is patient, and there is nowhere you need to be except here. Listening, breathing, letting the ancient history of your own body carry you gently into the dark. Before I tell you what this feature is, I need to take you back to the beginning. Not the beginning of human history, which is recent and brief, but the beginning of the story that made human history possible. The story of how life left the water and colonized the land, because the feature we are talking about tonight has its origins in that transition, in the moment when the ancestors of every land animal on Earth, every lizard and frog and bird and mammal, and every human who has ever lived made the most consequential journey in the history of biology. They crawled out of the sea and onto the shore. 375 million years ago, the world looked nothing like it does today. The continents were in different positions. The atmosphere had a different composition. The forests that existed were alien, strange towering plants that bore no resemblance to modern trees. Giant ferns and horsetails and club mosses reaching heights of 100 feet, their trunks covered not in bark as we know it, but in patterns of diamond-shaped leaf scars. The land was green, but the green was different. A world of spore-bearing plants that had colonized the land millions of years before anything with a backbone had managed to follow. And in the shallow coastal waters, in the warm tidal flats and brackish lagoons where freshwater rivers met the sea, something remarkable was happening. Fish were beginning to crawl. Not all fish, not even most fish. Just a few lineages, a few species in a few locations were developing features that would allow them to survive in the transition zone between water and land. They were developing limbs, stubby, awkward, multi-fingered limbs that were somewhere between fins and legs, not quite suitable for swimming and not quite suitable for walking, but adequate for hauling a body across a mudflat or through a shallow marsh. They were developing lungs, or rather they were repurposing an organ they already had, the swim bladder, the gas-filled sac that fish used to control their buoyancy, transforming it into a structure that could extract oxygen from air instead of just providing flotation. And they were developing something else, something less obvious but equally important, something that would persist in their descendants for hundreds of millions of years, through the age of amphibians and the age of reptiles and the age of dinosaurs and the age of dinosaurs and the age of mammals, all the way down to you, lying here tonight with that ancient inheritance still functioning inside your body. The most famous of these transitional creatures is a fish called Tiktaalik, discovered in 2004 on Ellesmere Island in the Canadian Arctic, which 375 million years ago was located near the equator in a warm tropical region. Tiktaalik was about 9 feet long, with a flat head, a crocodile-like snout, and most importantly, fins that contained the bones of a wrist and primitive fingers. It could do push-ups. It could prop itself up on its front fins and look around. It had a neck, something fish do not normally have, which meant it could turn its head independently of its body. It was not quite a fish and not quite a land animal. It was the transition incarnate, frozen in stone, a snapshot of one of the most important moments in the history of life. And inside Tiktaalik's body, in the arrangement of its internal organs, was a feature that you share with it across 375 million years of evolution. A feature that links you to a creature that crawled through walled Devonian mud before the first dinosaur, before the first mammal, before the first bird, before the first flower had ever bloomed on the face of the earth. You and Tiktaalik, separated by a gulf of time so vast that the human mind cannot truly comprehend it, share a piece of biological architecture. And that shared architecture is part of the story I am telling you tonight. Now, I know you are wondering what this feature is. I can feel the curiosity pulling at the edges of your mind, and I promise I will tell you. I will tell you exactly what it is, and I will tell you why it matters, and I will tell you the remarkable story of how science got it so completely wrong for so long. But first, I need to lay a little more groundwork, because the story only makes sense if you understand the principles that govern how evolution decides what to keep and what to throw away. And those principles are fascinating in their own right. Evolution does not plan. This is the most important thing to understand about how evolution works, and it is the thing that most people get wrong. Evolution has no foresight. It does not look ahead and prepare for future challenges. It does not design organisms for optimal performance. It does not sit down with a blueprint and engineer the best possible body. What evolution does is much simpler and, in many ways, much stranger. It lets organisms reproduce, and the ones whose bodies happen to be slightly better suited to their current environment tend to survive and reproduce slightly more than the ones whose bodies are slightly less suited. Over time, across thousands and millions of generations, this differential reproduction accumulates, and the features that contribute to survival and reproduction become more common, while the features that do not contribute, or that actively hinder survival, become less common and eventually disappear. This is natural selection, and it is a remarkably powerful process. Given enough time, it can produce the eye, the wing, the brain, the immune system, structures of almost unbelievable complexity and precision, all without any planning or design or intention. But it has limitations. It can only work with what already exists. It cannot start from scratch. It cannot redesign an organism from the ground up. It can only modify, tinker, adjust, repurpose, and edit what is already there. And this means that every organism alive today, including you, is not a clean, optimized design. It is a palimpsest, a document that has been written over and over and over again, each generation adding new text on top of the old, erasing some passages and modifying others, but never quite managing to erase everything. The old text shows through. The ancient features persist, sometimes modified, sometimes reduced, sometimes apparently useless, but always there, ghosts of the organism's evolutionary past haunting the architecture of its present body. Darwin recognized this. In 1871, in The Descent of Man, he compiled a list of what he called rudimentary or vestigial structures in the human body, features that he believed were remnants of our animal ancestry, left behind by evolution's incomplete editing process. The list included the muscles that allow some people to wiggle their ears, a remnant of the ability that many mammals have to rotate their ears towards sounds. It included the erector pili muscles, the tiny muscles attached to each hair follicle that contract when you are cold or frightened, producing goosebumps, a vestige of the ability of our fur-covered ancestors to fluff up their hair for insulation or to appear larger when threatened. It included the coccyx, the fused tailbones at the base of your spine, the remnant of the tail that your primate ancestors lost millions of years ago. And it included something else, something that Darwin described as perhaps the most significant vestigial structure in the human body, an organ that, he believed, had lost its function and was gradually being eliminated by natural selection. He was talking about the appendix, and he was wrong. Let that land gently. I know it might feel strange to hear that Darwin was wrong about something. Darwin is one of the greatest scientists who ever lived. His theory of evolution by natural selection is one of the most powerful and well-supported ideas in the history of science. But Darwin was human, and humans make mistakes, even brilliant ones, and the mistake Darwin made about the appendix was a mistake that the entire medical and scientific establishment would repeat for the next 150 years. A mistake that would lead to the routine surgical removal of a healthy organ from hundreds of millions of people. A mistake that is only now, in the 21st century, being fully recognized and corrected. If you have been listening to this and feeling that small electric pulse of surprise, the feeling of learning something that rearranges what you thought you knew, then this story is working the way it should. And if you want to make sure you do not miss stories like this in the future, there is a quiet, simple thing you can do. Just tap the subscribe button. It takes a moment, and it means that the next time a story like this appears, it will find its way to you. Think of it as leaving a door open in a house you might want to return to. Now, the appendix. Let me tell you what it is, where it is, and what everyone thought it did, which was nothing, before I tell you what it actually does, which is remarkable. The appendix is a small finger-shaped pouch that extends from the cecum, the beginning of the large intestine, in the lower right part of your abdomen. In humans, it is typically between 2 and 4 inches long, though the size varies. It is a hollow tube, closed at one end, open at the other, where it connects to the cecum, and it is lined with tissue that is rich in immune cells. It sits quietly in your abdomen, doing what it does, and most people never think about it unless it becomes inflamed, a condition called appendicitis, which can be extremely painful and, if untreated, life-threatening. Appendicitis is the reason most people know the appendix exists. It is one of the most common surgical emergencies in the world. Roughly 1 in 15 people will develop appendicitis at some point in their lives, and the standard treatment is surgical removal, a procedure called an appendectomy. And because people who have their appendix removed appear to live perfectly normal lives afterward, without any obvious deficit or dysfunction, the conclusion seemed obvious. The appendix does nothing. It is a useless remnant of our evolutionary past, a structure that once served a purpose in our distant ancestors, but that has been rendered obsolete by changes in diet, lifestyle, and anatomy. It is not just useless, it is dangerous, because it can become inflamed and kill you. It is, according to this view, the worst kind of evolutionary leftover, a ticking time bomb in your abdomen with no redeeming function. This view was so widely accepted that for most of the 20th century, surgeons routinely removed healthy appendixes during other abdominal surgeries. If they were already operating in the area and the appendix was right there, why not take it out? It was useless anyway, and removing it eliminated the risk of future appendicitis. This practice was so common that it was not even considered controversial. It was just good medicine, preventive care, removing a part of the body that, according to the scientific consensus, had no purpose. And this consensus held for decades. It held through the development of modern surgery. It held through the rise of evidence-based medicine. It held through the genomic revolution. It held even as the understanding of the immune system grew more sophisticated and more nuanced. Nobody questioned it seriously because nobody had a reason to. The appendix was useless. Everyone knew it. Darwin had said so. The textbook said so. Your doctor said so. Case closed? Except it was not closed, not even a little. Because while the medical establishment was busy removing appendixes by the millions, a few researchers were noticing things that did not fit the narrative. Quiet anomalies, small inconsistencies, data points that individually could be dismissed but that collectively pointed towards something that nobody wanted to hear. The appendix was not useless. The appendix was doing something. And what it was doing was so important that its discovery would eventually force a complete re-evaluation of one of the most firmly held assumptions in human biology. The first clue came from anatomy itself, and it was hiding in plain sight the entire time. The appendix is not just a hollow tube of intestinal tissue. It is packed, densely packed, with lymphoid tissue, the same type of tissue that makes up the lymph nodes, the tonsils, and the Peyer's patches in the small intestine. Lymphoid tissue is immune tissue. It is where immune cells are produced, educated, and stored. It is part of the body's defense system against pathogens, against bacteria and viruses and parasites. And the appendix has more of it, concentrated more densely than almost any other structure in the gut. This should have been a red flag. If the appendix were truly vestigial, truly on its way out, truly being eliminated by natural selection, you would expect it to be shrinking, degenerating, losing its specialized tissue and becoming a simple, featureless nub of intestinal wall. That is what happens to structures that are no longer useful. The eyes of cavefish, living in total darkness for thousands of generations, gradually degenerate, losing their pigment, their lenses, their optic nerves, until they are reduced to vestigial bumps beneath the skin. The hind limb bones of whales, which no longer have legs, have been reduced to tiny, disconnected fragments embedded in muscle, serving no structural purpose. When evolution is done with something, it does not maintain it in perfect working order. It lets it decay. And the appendix was not decaying. It was not degenerating. It was not losing its specialized tissue. It was maintaining it generation after generation at a significant metabolic cost in a body that was otherwise ruthlessly efficient about eliminating structures it did not need. The lymphoid tissue in the appendix was not an accident. It was not a leftover. It was being actively maintained by the body, which meant it was being actively maintained by evolution, which meant it was doing something that justified the cost of keeping it, something that natural selection considered important enough to preserve, even as it was eliminating tails and fur and full body hair and dozens of other features that no longer served a purpose. The appendix was not a vestige. It was a survivor. And the question was, what was it doing that was so important? The answer began to emerge in 2007, when a team of researchers at Duke University Medical Center, led by a surgeon and immunologist named William Parker, published a paper that proposed a radical new hypothesis about the function of the appendix. And the hypothesis was this: the appendix serves as a safe house for beneficial bacteria. Let me explain what that means, because it is one of the most elegant and surprising ideas in modern biology, and it connects the appendix to a revolution in our understanding of the human body that has been unfolding over the past 2 decades. Your body is not just your body. It is an ecosystem, a community, a vast teeming metropolis of microorganisms that live on your skin, in your mouth, in your nose, in your lungs, and most of all, in your gut. The human gastrointestinal tract, from your stomach to your large intestine, is home to roughly 38 trillion bacteria. 38 trillion. That is more bacterial cells than human cells in your entire body. These bacteria are not parasites, they are not invaders, they are partners. They have co-evolved with us over millions of years, and they perform functions that our own cells cannot perform. They help digest food. They produce vitamins. They train the immune system to distinguish between harmful pathogens and harmless substances. They protect the gut lining from damage. They influence mood, metabolism, inflammation, and even brain function through the gut-brain axis, a communication pathway between the gut microbiome and the central nervous system that scientists are only beginning to understand. You are, in a very real sense, not a single organism. You are a community, a superorganism, A collaboration between human cells and microbial cells that is so intimate, so essential, so deeply integrated that separating the two would be like trying to separate the instruments from the orchestra. The music only exists because they play together. And here is where the appendix comes in. Because your gut, this teeming microbial ecosystem, is vulnerable. It can be disrupted. Illness, infection, diarrhea caused by cholera or dysentery or food poisoning. These events can flush the beneficial bacteria out of the intestines, stripping the gut of the microbial community it depends on. In the modern world, this is an inconvenience. We have clean water, antibiotics, hospitals, rehydration therapy. We can recover from a bout of gastroenteritis without lasting consequences. And the gut microbiome will typically re-establish itself from the bacteria remaining in the intestinal folds and from environmental sources. But for most of human history, and for the entire history of every other species that has an appendix, a severe bout of diarrhea could be catastrophic. It could strip the gut clean. It could eliminate the beneficial bacteria that the organism depended on for digestion, for immune function, for protection against pathogens. And without those bacteria, the organism was vulnerable. Re-establishing the microbial community from scratch, without the aid of modern medicine, could take weeks or months, during which time the organism was at increased risk of further infection, malnutrition, and death. The appendix, according to Parker's hypothesis, solves this problem. It serves as a reservoir, a safe house, a biological bunker where a sample of the gut's beneficial bacteria can ride out the storm. When a severe infection flushes the main intestinal tract clean, the bacteria sheltering in the appendix survive, protected by the organ's narrow dead-end structure, which makes it difficult for the flushing action of diarrhea to reach them. After the infection passes, the bacteria emerge from the appendix and recolonize the gut, restoring the microbial community quickly and efficiently, without the organism having to start from scratch. The appendix is not useless. It is a backup drive, a biological insurance policy, a reserve supply of the bacteria your body needs to function, tucked away in a protected pocket of your intestine, ready to be deployed when disaster strikes. And the reason evolution has not eliminated it, the reason it has survived for millions of years despite the risk of appendicitis, is that the benefit it provides, the rapid restoration of the gut microbiome after a severe infection, outweighs the cost of occasionally becoming inflamed. In a world without modern medicine, an organism that could quickly restore its gut bacteria after a bout of cholera or dysentery had a significant survival advantage over an organism that had to re-establish its microbiome from nothing. The appendix was not a leftover. It was an adaptation, a brilliantly simple solution to a serious biological problem. And we had been cutting it out of people's bodies for a century without understanding what we were destroying. If that revelation gives you a small thrill of wonder, a small rearrangement of the way you see yourself and the body you inhabit, then hold on to that feeling because there is more. Much more. The story of the appendix does not end with the safe house hypothesis. It extends into every branch of biology, from evolutionary theory to immunology to the emerging science of the microbiome. And it raises questions about the human body, about the nature of evolution, about the relationship between what we think we know and what we actually know, that are as profound as they are unsettling. Let your body rest fully now. Let the information settle into the quiet spaces of your mind the way sediment settles to the bottom of a still pool. The water above is clear. The thoughts are there, but they are gentle. And the story continues unfolding at the pace of breath, at the pace of sleep, at the pace of the slow, patient, relentless process that built the body you are lying in tonight, over hundreds of millions of years, one tiny change at a time. I want to stay with the safe house hypothesis for a moment longer, because the evidence supporting it is both elegant and extensive, and it comes from a direction that most people would not expect. It comes from other animals. If the appendix is truly a useless vestige, a structure on its way out, then you would expect it to be rare. You would expect to find it only in humans and perhaps in our closest primate relatives, as a leftover from a recent common ancestor, gradually being eliminated across the lineage. This is what the vestigial theory predicts. Structures that are no longer useful are maintained only by evolutionary inertia, and they tend to be found only in closely related species that have not yet had enough time to fully eliminate them. But that is not what the evidence shows. The appendix is not rare. It is not restricted to humans and their close relatives. It appears independently in more than 500 mammalian species scattered across the entire mammalian family tree. It is found in certain primates, yes, but also in certain rodents, in certain marsupials, in certain carnivores, in certain ungulates, in species as diverse as the koala, the wombat, the beaver, the rabbit, the ramatan, and the manatee. And here is the crucial point. These species did not all inherit their appendixes from a single common ancestor. The appendix has evolved independently, from scratch, at least 32 separate times in the history of mammals. 32 times. This changes everything. A structure that evolves once might be an accident. A structure that evolves twice might be a coincidence. But a structure that evolves independently 32 times is not a vestige. It is not a leftover. It is not a mistake. It is a solution. Something that evolution returns to again and again, in species after species, because it works. Because it solves the problem that many different mammals face, the problem of maintaining a healthy gut microbiome in the face of periodic infection. And it solves it so effectively that natural selection has independently produced it in dozens of unrelated lineages. The appendix is not disappearing. It is spreading. It is one of the most successful and most frequently reinvented structures in the entire history of mammalian evolution. And if you are lying here thinking about the small, finger-shaped pouch in the lower right corner of your own abdomen, the one that every biology teacher you ever had told you was useless, and you are feeling a new kind of respect for it, a new kind of wonder at the fact that it has been sitting there your entire life, quietly doing a job that nobody knew it was doing, protecting the bacterial community that keeps you healthy, maintaining a reserve supply of the microorganisms your body needs to function, then you are feeling what I want you to feel. Because the story of the appendix is not just a story about an organ, it is a story about assumptions, about the danger of declaring something useless just because you do not understand its use, about the arrogance of certainty in the face of complexity, and about the quiet, stubborn persistence of a tiny organ that refused to be erased by evolution or by the surgeons who thought they knew better. There is more to this story. There is the question of why the appendix sometimes becomes inflamed, and whether appendicitis is actually a malfunction or something more complicated. There is the question of what happens to people who have their appendix removed, and whether the absence of this organ has consequences that we are only now beginning to understand. There is the question of what the appendix tells us about the broader relationship between the human body and its microbial inhabitants, a relationship that is turning out to be far more complex, far more intimate, and far more important than anyone imagined even 20 years ago. And there is the question of what other so-called vestigial structures might turn out to be not vestigial at all, not useless leftovers, but hidden players in the ongoing drama of human biology, performing functions that we have not yet discovered because we have not yet thought to look. All of these questions are ahead of us, and the answers, when they come, are going to surprise you. If this is the kind of story that makes your mind hum with curiosity even as your body drifts toward rest, then you are exactly where you should be. And if you want to help the story reach other curious minds, there is something simple and quiet you can do. Just tap the like button. That small gesture sends a signal that carries this story further into the world to people who might be lying awake right now, looking for something to think about as they fall asleep. Your tap is a kindness to a stranger you will never meet. Now, let me take you deeper. The year was 1961, and a surgeon in the United States was performing what he considered a routine appendectomy on a young man who had come to the emergency room with severe abdominal pain. The surgery went smoothly. The appendix was removed, examined briefly, and discarded. The patient recovered without complications and went home a few days later. And nobody, not the surgeon, not the patient, not the nurses who assisted, not the pathologist who glanced at the removed organ under a microscope before filing his report. Nobody thought to ask whether removing that small, finger-shaped pouch might have consequences that would not become apparent for years or even decades. Nobody asked because nobody needed to ask. The answer was already known. The appendix was useless. Removing it was like removing a spare button from a coat. The coat still functioned perfectly. The button had never been attached to anything important. This was the medical consensus, and it was held with a confidence that, in retrospect, is almost breathtaking. Not tentative confidence. Not cautious, qualified, subject to revision confidence. Absolute confidence. The kind of confidence that does not question itself because it does not believe there is anything to question. The appendix was vestigial. Darwin said so. The textbook said so. A century of surgical experience confirmed it. People lived perfectly well without their appendixes. End of discussion. And yet, even in 1961, even at the peak of this certainty, there were small, quiet, easily overlooked pieces of evidence that something was not quite right. Pieces that did not fit. Pieces that, if anyone had been paying attention, might have suggested that the story of the appendix was far more complicated than the textbooks allowed. Let your body settle deeper. Let the muscles in your legs relax. The ones in your calves, the ones along your shins, the ones in your feet that have carried you through the day. Let them soften and release. The story is doing its work, and your body is doing its work, and neither needs your supervision. Just listen. Just breathe. The first piece of evidence that should have raised questions was anatomical, and it had been known since the 19th century. The appendix, as I mentioned earlier, is packed with lymphoid tissue, dense concentrations of immune cells, organized into structures called lymphoid follicles, line the walls of the appendix in a pattern that is remarkably similar to the lymphoid tissue found in the tonsils and in the Peyer's patches of the small intestine. This tissue is not passive. It is not a remnant of something that used to be active and has since shut down. It is active. It is producing immune cells. It is sampling the contents of the gut. It is communicating with the rest of the immune system. It is, by every measurable standard, functioning. Now, if you found an organ in the body that was densely packed with active immune tissue, that was producing immune cells. That was sampling the chemical and microbial environment of its surroundings and sending signals to the rest of the body's defense network. You would not normally call that organ useless. You would call it an immune organ. You would study it. You would try to understand what it was doing and why. But the appendix carried the label vestigial, and that label was so powerful, so entrenched, so authoritative, that it overrode the evidence of the organ's own tissue. Scientists looked at the lymphoid tissue and essentially shrugged. Yes, there was immune tissue there, but the appendix was vestigial, so the immune tissue must be incidental, left over from whatever function the organ used to have, not evidence of a current function. The conclusion came before the evidence. The label determined the interpretation rather than the other way around. This is something that happens more often in science than scientists like to admit. A dominant paradigm, a widely accepted framework of understanding, shapes the way evidence is interpreted. Data that supports the paradigm is accepted and integrated. Data that challenges the paradigm is explained away, dismissed as anomalous or simply not seen, because the paradigm acts as a filter, letting in what fits and screening out what does not. Thomas Kuhn, the philosopher of science, called this normal science, the process by which a scientific community works within an established paradigm, solving puzzles and accumulating knowledge without questioning the fundamental assumptions that underlie the paradigm. And normal science works beautifully most of the time. But it has a blind spot. It cannot see the things that the paradigm says are not there. And the function of the appendix was one of those things. It was not there because the paradigm said it could not be there, and so for over a century it was not seen. The second piece of evidence that should have raised questions came from a different direction entirely, and it was even more difficult to ignore. It came from the animals. As I described earlier, the appendix is not unique to humans. It appears in more than 500 species of mammals, scattered across the mammalian family tree in a pattern that can only be explained by convergent evolution, the independent evolution of the same structure in unrelated lineages. And this pattern was known long before William Parker published his safe house hypothesis in 2007. Comparative anatomists had been cataloguing the distribution of the appendix across mammalian species for decades, and the pattern they found was deeply inconsistent with the vestigial interpretation. Consider the logic. If the appendix is vestigial in humans, if it is a structure that once served a function but no longer does, then you would expect to find it only in species that share a recent common ancestor with humans, species in which the appendix has not yet had time to fully disappear. You would expect a simple, clean pattern of inheritance. The appendix present in closely related species and absent in distantly related ones, gradually shrinking and disappearing as you move further from the common ancestor in which it was last functional. But that is not the pattern. The pattern is chaotic. The appendix appears and disappears across the mammalian family tree with no regard for phylogenetic distance. It is present in some primates but absent in others, present in some rodents but absent in most, present in rabbits but absent in their close relatives the pikas, present in koalas and wombats but absent in kangaroos, present in some species of Old World monkeys but absent in others. And in many cases, the appendix-bearing species are separated by vast evolutionary distances, distances that can only be bridged by assuming that the appendix evolved independently, from scratch, in each lineage. 32 independent origins, at minimum, possibly more, depending on how the phylogenetic analysis is conducted. 32 times, in 32 different lineages, natural selection built the same structure, a blind-ended pouch at the junction of the small and large intestines, rich in lymphoid tissue, housing a community of beneficial bacteria. The probability of this happening by chance, the probability of a useless structure independently evolving 32 times in unrelated lineages, is essentially zero. Useless structures do not evolve, they disappear. The fact that the appendix keeps evolving, keeps appearing in new lineages, keeps being built from scratch by natural selection in species that never inherited it from a common ancestor, is about as strong a piece of evidence as you can get that it is not useless. It is being actively selected for. It is providing a benefit. Natural selection is choosing it again and again and again and again because it works. And there is another detail in the comparative data that I find particularly elegant. When researchers mapped the presence and absence of the appendix across the mammalian family tree and then correlated it with the average concentration of cecal lymphoid tissue in each species, they found a strong positive association. Species with an appendix tend to have higher concentrations of lymphoid tissue in the cecum, the part of the large intestine where the appendix is located. This makes sense if the appendix is functioning as an immune organ and as a safe house for beneficial bacteria. It does not make sense if the appendix is a useless remnant that is gradually degenerating. And when the researchers looked at the evolutionary trajectory of the appendix, whether it was getting smaller over time or staying the same size, they found something that directly contradicted the vestigial hypothesis. In lineages where the appendix was present, it was not shrinking, it was stable. And in some lineages, it was actually getting larger. The appendix was not on its way out. It was holding steady or expanding. Evolution was not trying to delete it. Evolution was maintaining it, nurturing it, and in some cases, making it bigger. If this story is making you see your own body in a new light, if it is making you wonder what else might be hidden in the assumptions you have always taken for granted, then you are responding to the story the way I hoped you would. And if you want to be part of a conversation about it, if you want to share your own moment of surprise or your own questions about the hidden functions of the body, leave a comment when you wake up tomorrow. Tell me what surprised you most. Tell me what you want to know more about. Those comments are not just feedback, they are the beginning of a conversation that matters, and they help other people find this story when they need it. Now, let me take you back to the safe house hypothesis, because I want to explore it more deeply. I want to show you how the appendix actually works as a bacterial reservoir, because the mechanism is beautifully simple and the implications are profound. Your large intestine is, from a microbial perspective, a war zone. It is the most densely populated microbial habitat in your entire body, home to trillions of bacteria from hundreds of different species, all competing for space and resources in the warm, nutrient-rich environment of the gut. Under normal conditions, this competition is productive. The different bacterial species keep each other in check. The beneficial bacteria, the ones that help with digestion and immune function, maintain a stable community that resists invasion by harmful species. This community, the gut microbiome, is like a coral reef, a complex interdependent ecosystem in which each species plays a role and the health of the whole depends on the balance of the parts. But reefs can be destroyed, and gut microbiomes can be destroyed too. A severe bout of diarrheal disease caused by cholera, dysentery, rotavirus, E. coli, or any number of other pathogens can flush the intestinal tract so violently and so completely that the resident bacterial community is decimated. The beneficial bacteria that have been maintaining the ecosystem are washed away. The gut is left empty, a cleared field, vulnerable to recolonization by whatever bacteria happen to be available. And in a world without modern medicine, without clean water, without antibiotics, without the ability to carefully manage the recovery process, what happens next can determine whether the organism lives or dies. If the gut is recolonized quickly by beneficial bacteria, the organism recovers, the microbial ecosystem is restored, digestion resumes normally. The immune system, which depends on the gut microbiome for calibration and support, continues to function effectively. Life goes on. But if the gut is recolonized slowly, or if it is recolonized by harmful bacteria that take advantage of the emptied landscape to establish themselves before the beneficial species can return, the organism is in trouble. Chronic infection, malnutrition, immune dysfunction, and death become real possibilities. The speed and quality of gut recolonization after a severe diarrheal event is, in a world without modern medicine, a matter of life and death. And this is where the appendix earns its place. The appendix sits at the beginning of the large intestine, connected to the cecum by a narrow opening. Its interior is a long, narrow, dead-ended tube, a cul-de-sac of intestinal tissue that is sheltered from the main flow of material through the gut. When a severe bout of diarrhea flushes the large intestine clean, the bacteria living in the appendix are protected. The narrow opening of the appendix, combined with its dead-end structure, means that the flushing action that clears the main intestinal tract does not reach the bacteria hiding inside. They are safe. They are sheltered. They are, quite literally, in a safe house. And the immune tissue that lines the appendix plays a crucial role in maintaining this safe house. The lymphoid follicles in the appendix wall produce a substance called secretory immunoglobulin A, or SIG, which coats the bacteria living in the appendix and protects them from attack by the body's own immune system. This is important because the immune system is designed to destroy bacteria. If the bacteria in the appendix were not protected, the body's immune cells would attack and eliminate them, defeating the purpose of the safe house. The SIG acts as a molecular badge, a signal that tells the immune system these bacteria are friends, not enemies, do not attack. It is a remarkably sophisticated piece of biological engineering, a system within a system, designed to maintain a reserve population of beneficial bacteria in a protected environment within the body. And there is another layer to this that I find particularly beautiful: the biofilm. Inside the appendix, the beneficial bacteria do not just float freely in the intestinal fluid. They attach to the wall of the appendix and form a biofilm, a dense structured community of bacteria embedded in a matrix of proteins and carbohydrates that they secrete themselves. The biofilm is like a microbial city, with the bacteria organized in layers, communicating with each other through chemical signals, sharing resources, and cooperating to maintain the structure. And the biofilm is remarkably resilient. It is difficult to disrupt. It resists the physical forces that flush bacteria out of the main intestinal tract. It resists attack by pathogens. It resists even antibiotics, which is one of the reasons why biofilms are such a challenge in medical settings. The bacteria in the appendix are not just hiding in a safe house. They have built themselves a fortress inside the safe house, a fortified microbial community that can survive conditions that would destroy free-floating bacteria in the open gut. After the diarrheal event passes, after the pathogen is cleared and the gut begins to recover, the bacteria in the appendix emerge. They detach from the biofilm, or pieces of the biofilm break off and are carried out of the appendix into the cecum and from there into the large intestine. They spread through the emptied gut, recolonizing the intestinal tract, re-establishing the microbial community, restoring the ecosystem to its pre-infection state. The gut recovers, the organism recovers, and the appendix, its job done, begins quietly rebuilding its reserve population, preparing for the next time it is needed. This is what evolution kept. This is what evolution kept. This is what evolution decided was too important to lose. Not a useless remnant, not a vestigial leftover. A sophisticated biological system designed to protect the organism's most important microbial partnership. A backup drive for the gut microbiome, a safe house with immune protection and a biofilm fortress. A structure so useful that evolution has independently invented it at least 32 times in the history of mammals. And you have one. Right now, sitting quietly in the lower right part of your abdomen, doing its job, maintaining its bacterial reserve, standing ready to restore your gut microbiome if it is ever compromised. You have been carrying this ancient, elegant, misunderstood organ your entire life, and until tonight, you might never have known what it was doing. Let that thought settle over you like a warm blanket. Your body is more remarkable than you knew. More carefully designed, more deeply functional, more beautifully adapted than the textbooks ever told you. And the appendix is just the beginning of that revelation. Now I want to address a question that might be forming in your mind, because it is a question that many people ask when they first hear the safe house hypothesis. And it is a good question. If the appendix is so important, why can people live without it? Why do the hundreds of millions of people who have had appendectomy seem to function perfectly well? If the appendix is providing a critical service, should not its removal have obvious devastating consequences? The answer is subtle and important, and it reveals something crucial about the difference between surviving and thriving, and about the difference between living in the modern world and living in the world that shaped our evolution. In the modern world, in a society with clean water, reliable sanitation, antibiotics, hospitals, and access to a diverse diet, the appendix's safe house function is rarely needed. Severe diarrheal events that completely strip the gut of its bacterial community are relatively uncommon in developed nations, and when they do occur, modern medicine provides the support needed for recovery. Probiotics, controlled rehydration, antibiotics to combat secondary infections, all of these tools help the gut microbiome recover even without the appendix's bacterial reserve. In the modern world, the appendix is like a fire extinguisher in a building with a state-of-the-art sprinkler system. It is useful, but if it is removed, the sprinkler system can usually handle the job. But take away the sprinkler system, take away the clean water, the sanitation, the antibiotics, the hospitals, put the person in the environment that shaped human evolution for the overwhelming majority of our existence, an environment in which diarrheal diseases were common. Water sources were frequently contaminated, antibiotics did not exist, and a severe bout of cholera or dysentery could kill you, not through dehydration alone but through the cascading failure of the gut ecosystem. In that environment, the appendix is not a fire extinguisher. It is a lifeline. It is the difference between a gut that recovers in days and a gut that takes weeks to recover, during which time the organism is vulnerable to secondary infections, malnutrition, and death. And there is evidence for this. Studies have shown that people who have had their appendix removed are at higher risk of certain infections, including Clostridioides difficile infection, commonly known as C. diff, a severe and sometimes fatal infection of the large intestine that is often triggered by antibiotic use. Antibiotics kill beneficial gut bacteria along with the targeted pathogen, creating exactly the kind of cleared gut scenario that the appendix is designed to address. Without the appendix, the gut has no reserve population to draw on. The beneficial bacteria have to recolonize from scratch, competing with C. diff for the newly emptied territory. And in too many cases, C. diff wins. The association between appendectomy and increased C. diff risk has been documented in multiple studies, that the strength of the association varies and the research is still ongoing. But the pattern is there. People without an appendix are more vulnerable to at least some types of gut infection than people with an appendix. The effect is not dramatic in the modern world where other medical interventions can compensate. But it is measurable. It is real. And it is exactly what you would predict if the appendix is functioning as a safe house for beneficial bacteria. There is another finding that supports this picture, and it comes from a surprising direction. Researchers studying the recovery of the gut microbiome after antibiotic treatment have found that people with an intact appendix tend to recover their microbial diversity more quickly than people who have had an appendectomy. The appendix appears to accelerate the restoration of the gut ecosystem, seeding the emptied intestine with the bacterial species that were sheltering inside it. Without the appendix, the recovery process takes longer, and the resulting microbial community may be less diverse and less resilient than it was before the antibiotic treatment. This is not a trivial finding. The diversity and resilience of the gut microbiome are increasingly recognized as critical factors in overall health. A diverse microbiome is more stable, more resistant to invasion by pathogens, and more effective at performing the metabolic and immune functions that the body depends on. A less diverse microbiome is associated with a range of health problems, including inflammatory bowel disease, obesity, type 2 diabetes, allergies, and even mental health disorders. The appendix, by helping to maintain microbial diversity, may be contributing to long-term health in ways that go far beyond its safe house function. And here is where the story becomes even more interesting, because the relationship between the appendix and the immune system turns out to be deeper and more complex than even the safe house hypothesis initially suggested. In 2015, a team of researchers at Midwestern University in Arizona published a study that examined the evolutionary history of the appendix in unprecedented detail. They analyzed the presence or absence of the appendix in over 500 mammalian species, mapped these data onto the mammalian family tree, and used statistical models to reconstruct the evolutionary trajectory of the organ over the past 80 million years. And their findings added a new dimension to the story. They confirmed the convergent evolution of the appendix, the fact that it has evolved independently at least 32 times. But they also found something new. They found that once the appendix appears in a lineage, it almost never disappears. In other words, it is easy for evolution to gain an appendix, but it is very hard to lose one. This is exactly the pattern you would expect for a structure that provides a strong selective advantage. If the appendix were useless, you would expect it to appear and disappear frequently, drifting in and out of existence through random evolutionary processes. But it does not. It appears and then it stays. Evolution grabs onto it and holds on. This is the signature of a functional organ, not a vestige. The researchers also found that the appearance of the appendix in a lineage was statistically associated with higher average concentrations of cecal lymphoid tissue. This confirmed the link between the appendix and immune function. Species with appendixes have more immune tissue in their cecum than species without, suggesting that the appendix enhances or supplements the immune capacity of the gut. And there was one more finding, perhaps the most intriguing of all. The researchers found that the appendix tended to appear in species with larger social groups. Species that lived in larger, denser populations where the risk of epidemic disease and the rate of pathogen transmission were higher, were more likely to have evolved an appendix. This makes perfect sense in light of the safe house hypothesis. In a large social group, the risk of severe diarrheal disease is higher because pathogens spread more easily. The need for a bacterial reserve, a way to quickly restore the gut microbiome after infection, is greater. And so natural selection favors the evolution of the appendix in these species because the benefit it provides is greater in a high-risk social environment. Humans are a social species. We've always lived in groups. For most of our evolutionary history, we lived in bands and tribes, sharing food, sharing water, sharing space. The risk of epidemic disease in these social groups was constant and significant. Diarrheal diseases spread through contaminated water and food were a leading cause of death in human populations long before modern sanitation. In this context, the appendix was not just useful, it was essential. It was a survival tool, honed by millions of years of evolution in a social species living in a pathogen-rich environment, designed to keep the gut functional in the face of repeated microbial assault. And we spent a century cutting it out of people's bodies because we thought it was useless. Let your mind sit with that for a moment. Not with anger or blame. The doctors and scientists who promoted the vestigial view were not foolish or malicious. They were working within the best available knowledge of their time in a paradigm that made the appendix's vestigial status seem obvious and unquestionable. They made a mistake, but it was an honest mistake, born of the limitations of their understanding. And the correction of that mistake, the slow, painstaking process of accumulating evidence and building a new understanding, is a testament to the self-correcting nature of science. Science gets things wrong. Sometimes it gets things wrong for a very long time. But eventually, if the evidence is strong enough, the paradigm shifts. The old understanding gives way to a new one. And the new understanding, while never perfect, while always subject to further revision, is closer to the truth than the one it replaced. Now I want to take you into a part of this story that is less about the appendix itself and more about what the appendix teaches us. Because the lesson of the appendix extends far beyond the single organ. It extends to the entire way we think about the human body, about evolution, and about the concept of vestigial structures. And the lesson is this: be very careful about calling something useless just because you do not understand what it does. Darwin's list of vestigial structures in the human body was long. He identified roughly a dozen structures that he believed were remnants of our evolutionary past. Structures that had lost their function and were gradually being eliminated by natural selection. And over the past century and a half, as our understanding of the human body has deepened, many of those structures have turned out to be not vestigial at all. The tonsils, for example, were long considered vestigial. Like the appendix, they were routinely removed, especially in children. Tonsillectomy was one of the most common surgical procedures in the 20th century, performed millions of times on the assumption that the tonsils were useless lumps of tissue that mainly served as breeding grounds for infection. And like the appendix, the tonsils turned out to be immune organs, actively sampling the air and food that passes through the throat, detecting pathogens, and initiating immune responses. They are part of a ring of lymphoid tissue called Waldeyer's ring that surrounds the entrance to the throat and serves as a first line of defense against inhaled and ingested pathogens. They are not useless, they are sentinels. And while tonsillectomy is still performed when the tonsils become chronically infected and cause more harm than good, the routine removal of healthy tonsils has been largely abandoned as the medical community has come to recognize their immune function. The coccyx, the fused tailbones at the base of the spine, was another structure on Darwin's vestigial list. And it is true that the coccyx is the remnant of a tail that our primate ancestors lost millions of years ago. But the coccyx is not functionless. It serves as an anchor point for several important muscles, ligaments, and tendons, including muscles of the pelvic floor that support the organs of the lower abdomen and play a crucial role in bowel and bladder control. It helps distribute weight when you sit down. It provides attachment points for muscles that are essential for walking, running, and maintaining posture. People who fracture their coccyx discover very quickly that this supposedly useless structure is anything but. The wisdom teeth were considered vestigial, remnants of a time when our ancestors had larger jaws and needed extra molars to chew tough, fibrous plant material. And it is true that many people today do not have enough room in their jaws for wisdom teeth, which is why they are so often extracted. But the wisdom teeth themselves are not dysfunctional. They are fully formed, fully functional teeth. The problem is not the teeth. The problem is the jaw, which has shrunk over the course of human evolution due to changes in diet and cooking practices. The wisdom teeth are doing exactly what they are designed to do. It is the rest of the anatomy that has changed around them. The erector pili muscles, the tiny muscles that cause goosebumps, were considered vestigial, a leftover from the days when our ancestors had fur that could be fluffed up for insulation or to appear larger when threatened. And it is true that goosebumps serve no obvious function in a relatively hairless species. But recent research has found that the erector pili muscles are connected to stem cells in the hair follicle and that their contraction may play a role in stimulating hair growth and skin repair. The muscles are not just creating a pointless skin response. They may be participating in the maintenance and regeneration of the skin itself. The list goes on. Structure after structure that was dismissed as vestigial has turned out, on closer examination, to have a function. Not always a dramatic function. not always an essential function, but a function nonetheless. And the pattern suggests that we should be very cautious about declaring any part of the body useless, because the history of such declarations is a history of being wrong. This is not to say that vestigial structures do not exist. They do. The human body contains structures that genuinely appear to be remnants of our evolutionary past, reduced in function, no longer performing the role they once played. The nictitating membrane, the small fold of tissue in the inner corner of the eye, is probably a genuine vestige of the third eyelid that many reptiles and birds possess. The palmaris longus muscle, a muscle in the forearm that is absent in about 14% of the population, appears to have lost its original function, which may have been related to chyming. These structures may truly be on their way out, gradually being reduced and eliminated by the indifferent editorial hand of natural selection. But the history of the appendix should make us humble about such judgments. The history of the tonsils should make us careful. The history of the coccyx and the wisdom teeth and the arictopili muscles should make us suspicious of any claim that a part of the body is useless, because the human body has been shaped by hundreds of millions of years of evolution, and evolution does not keep things around for no reason. If a structure has persisted, if it has been maintained across thousands of generations at a metabolic cost, if it has not degenerated and disappeared the way truly useless structures do, then the most likely explanation is that it is doing something. We may not know what it is doing. We may not have the tools or the knowledge to discover its function. But the default assumption should be function, not vestige. The default assumption should be that evolution knows what it is doing, even when we do not understand why. Let your breathing deepen now. Let your inhale be a little slower than the last, each exhale a little longer. The story is moving through your mind like a slow river, carrying ideas and images and small revelations, and you do not need to hold on to any of them. Let them flow. Let them settle where they will. The river knows where it is going. I want to turn now to a different aspect of the appendix story, one that connects it to the larger revolution in biological science that has been unfolding over the past 2 decades. I want to talk about the microbiome because the appendix cannot be fully understood without understanding the vast, invisible, teeming world of bacteria that lives inside you, and the realization that this world is not a threat to be eliminated, but a partner to be nurtured is one of the most important shifts in scientific thinking in the history of medicine. For most of the history of modern medicine, bacteria were the enemy. The discovery that infectious diseases were caused by microscopic organisms, the germ theory of disease, was one of the greatest advances in the history of science. It led to antiseptics, antibiotics, vaccines, sanitation, and all the other tools that have saved countless millions of lives. And it created a mindset, a deeply ingrained medical philosophy, that can be summarized in 3 words: kill the germs. Bacteria were bad. They caused disease, they caused infection, they caused death, and the goal of medicine was to eliminate them, to sterilize the body and its environment, to create a world as free from bacteria as possible. This mindset saved lives. It continues to save lives. Antibiotics are one of the most important medical innovations in history, but the mindset also created a blind spot. It made it very difficult for the medical establishment to see bacteria as anything other than threats. And when evidence began to accumulate that the human body was home to trillions of bacteria that were not causing disease, that were in fact contributing to health, the medical establishment was slow to adjust. The germ theory paradigm, like the vestigial appendix paradigm, shaped the interpretation of evidence in ways that made it difficult to see what was actually happening. The revolution began in earnest in the early 2000s, when advances in DNA sequencing technology made it possible to identify the bacteria living in the human gut without having to culture them in a laboratory. Previous methods of studying gut bacteria required growing them in petri dishes, and it turned out that the vast majority of gut bacteria could not be cultured using standard laboratory techniques. They were anaerobic, meaning they lived in the oxygen-free environment of the gut and died when exposed to air. They had complex nutritional requirements that could not be replicated in a laboratory setting, and they depended on interactions with other bacterial species that were absent in a petri dish. For decades, scientists have been studying the gut microbiome by looking at the tiny fraction of species that could be cultured, and they have been drawing conclusions about the whole community based on this unrepresentative sample. It was like studying a coral reef by looking at the few species that could survive in an aquarium. DNA sequencing changed everything. By extracting DNA directly from gut samples and sequencing it, researchers could identify every bacterial species present, whether or not it could be cultured. And the results were staggering. The gut microbiome was not a few dozen species of bacteria, it was hundreds of species, thousands in some estimates. A community of almost inconceivable diversity and complexity, interacting with the human body in ways that nobody had anticipated. The gut microbiome produces vitamins that the human body cannot produce on its own, including vitamin K and certain B vitamins. It breaks down complex carbohydrates that human enzymes cannot digest, extracting energy and nutrients that would otherwise be lost. It produces short-chain fatty acids that nourish the cells lining the intestinal wall, maintaining the integrity of the gut barrier and preventing harmful substances from leaking into the bloodstream. It trains the immune system, teaching it to distinguish between harmful pathogens and harmless substances, calibrating the inflammatory response so that it is strong enough to fight infection, but not so strong that it attacks the body's own tissues. It produces neurotransmitters including serotonin, the chemical that regulates mood and communicates with the brain through the vagus nerve, influencing everything from anxiety to appetite to sleep. The gut microbiome is not a passenger. It is a partner. It is a co-pilot. It is so intimately integrated into human physiology that some scientists have suggested it should be considered an organ in its own right. An organ that happens to be made of bacteria rather than human cells, but that performs functions that are every bit as essential as the functions performed by the liver or the kidneys or the heart. And the appendix, that small, supposedly useless pouch in the lower right corner of your abdomen, is the organ that protects this partnership. It is the safe house that ensures the microbial community can survive a catastrophic disruption and restore itself. It is the immune organ that samples the bacterial population of the gut and produces the antibodies that protect beneficial bacteria from attack. It is the nursery where bacterial biofilms are maintained in a protected environment, ready to reseed the gut when needed. The appendix is the guardian of the microbiome. And the microbiome, it turns out, is one of the most important systems in the human body. The irony is almost unbearable. For over a century, doctors were removing the organ that protects the bacterial community that maintains the gut, which influences the immune system, which affects everything from digestion to mental health to chronic disease. They were removing it because they thought it was useless, and they thought it was useless because they did not understand the system it was part of. They could not see the function of the appendix because they could not see the microbiome, and they could not see the microbiome because their technology was not advanced enough to reveal it. The appendix was a solution to a problem that science had not yet discovered, and by the time science discovered the problem, millions of appendixes had already been removed. This is not a story about blame, it is a story about the limits of knowledge and the dangers of premature certainty. It is a story about what happens when science declares something settled before it has all the evidence. And it is a story about the remarkable capacity of evolution to build systems so sophisticated, so elegant, so deeply integrated, that they can hide in plain sight for a century and a half without being understood. You are lying here tonight with an ancient organ inside you that has been misunderstood, maligned, and routinely removed for over 100 years. And that organ is quietly doing its job, maintaining its bacterial reserve, supporting your immune system, protecting the microbial partnership that keeps you healthy. It has been doing this for your entire life. It has been doing this for the entire history of your species. It has been doing it, in one form or another, for tens of millions of years, since before your ancestors were human, since before they were primates, since before they were even recognizably mammalian. Evolution tried to delete many things from your body over the course of those millions of years. It deleted the tail, it deleted the fur, it deleted the claws, it deleted the snout, it deleted the ability to synthesize vitamin C, it deleted the full set of olfactory receptors that give dogs and cats their extraordinary sense of smell. Evolution is a ruthless editor, and it cut everything that did not earn its place. But it could not cut the appendix. It tried. The forces that eliminate useless structures, the accumulation of random mutations that gradually degrade unused organs, the metabolic savings of not maintaining an organ that provides no benefit, these forces have been acting on the appendix for millions of years. And they have failed. The appendix is still here, not because evolution is sloppy, not because the editing process is incomplete, but because the editing process is incomplete, but because the appendix is earning its place. It is providing a benefit that outweighs its cost. It is doing something so important that natural selection protects it, maintains it, and has independently reinvented it at least 32 times in the history of mammals. Evolution tried to delete this from your body for millions of years. It failed. And now finally, we are beginning to understand why. If you are still with me, still floating in the warm space between waking and sleeping, still letting the story wash over you like water over smooth stones, I want you to know that the story is not over. There are layers still to uncover. There are questions still to ask. There are revelations still to come about your body, about the ancient features you carry, about the relationship between your cells and the trillions of microorganisms that call your body home. The appendix is the doorway into a much larger story, a story about what it means to be a living organism in a world shaped by hundreds of millions of years of evolution. And the deeper you go into that story, the more astonishing it becomes. There is a moment in the history of medicine that deserves to be remembered more widely than it is, a moment that captures the full weight of the mistake that was made about the appendix and the full scale of the consequences that followed. In the 1950s and 60s, during the height of the era when the appendix was considered not just useless but actively dangerous, a trend emerged in certain countries that seems almost unbelievable from the perspective of the 21st century. Doctors began recommending prophylactic appendectomy, the removal of healthy appendixes from healthy people, not because the organ was inflamed, not because the patient was in pain, not because there was any immediate medical need, but simply as a precaution. The logic, such as it was, went like this. The appendix serves no function. It can become inflamed and cause a life-threatening emergency. Therefore, removing it preemptively eliminates the risk without any downside. It was considered prudent medicine, good practice, an obvious decision. In some countries, this recommendation was applied with particular enthusiasm. In certain military contexts, soldiers deploying to remote areas where surgical facilities were unavailable were encouraged or even required to have their appendixes removed before deployment, on the theory that an appendicitis attack in the field, far from a hospital, could be fatal. In some pediatric practices, doctors recommended removing the appendix during any abdominal surgery performed on a child, regardless of whether the appendix was involved in the original condition. The reasoning was always the same. Why leave a ticking time bomb in the body when you have the opportunity to remove it safely? Why keep a useless organ that can only cause problems? And nobody questioned this. Almost nobody. The consensus was so complete, so monolithic, so deeply embedded in medical education and surgical practice, that challenging it would have been like challenging the law of gravity. The appendix was useless. Everyone knew it, and removing it was simply common sense. Let your body soften even further into the surface beneath you. Let the small muscles around your eyes relax. Let your tongue rest loosely in your mouth. Let the gentle weight of the story press you deeper into the comfort of the night. You are safe, you are warm, and the story is carrying you. Now, I want to tell you about what happened when some researchers finally began to look at the long-term consequences of appendectomy, not the short-term consequences which had been well studied and which confirmed that people could survive without their appendix. The long-term consequences, the subtle, slow-developing, easily overlooked effects that might take years or decades to become apparent. Because the difference between surviving without an organ and thriving without it, between functioning adequately and functioning optimally, is a difference that can only be seen over time. And for a very long time, nobody was looking. The first significant findings came from studies of inflammatory bowel disease, specifically Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, two chronic conditions in which the immune system attacks the lining of the gut, causing inflammation, pain, bleeding, and progressive damage to the intestinal tract. These are devastating diseases. They are lifelong, they are difficult to treat, and they are becoming more common, particularly in developed countries, for reasons that are not fully understood. Several large studies conducted in different countries over different time periods found a statistically significant association between appendectomy and an increased risk of certain forms of inflammatory bowel disease. People who had their appendix removed, particularly those who had it removed at a young age, were more likely to develop Crohn's disease than people who still had their appendix. The association was not enormous, it was not a guarantee. Having an appendectomy did not mean you would develop Crohn's disease, but the risk was elevated and the elevation was consistent across studies. The relationship between appendectomy and ulcerative colitis was more complex and in some ways more surprising. Some studies found that appendectomy actually reduced the risk of ulcerative colitis, which seemed to contradict the idea that the appendix was beneficial. But on closer examination, the picture became more nuanced. The protective effect was seen primarily in people who had their appendix removed for genuine appendicitis, not for other reasons. And researchers hypothesized that the inflammation associated with appendicitis might trigger a specific immune response that happened to be protective against ulcerative colitis, while the loss of the appendix itself might have different effects on different aspects of immune function. The relationship between the appendix and inflammatory bowel disease turned out to be more complicated than a simple good or bad, present or absent equation. It was a relationship shaped by the specific circumstances of the appendix's removal, the age at which it was removed, the state of the immune system at the time, and the complex interplay between the appendix, the gut microbiome, and the immune response. And there were other findings. Studies began to appear suggesting that appendectomy was associated with changes in the gut microbiome that persisted for years after the surgery. People who had their appendix removed tended to have less diverse gut microbial communities than people who still had their appendix. They had lower populations of certain beneficial bacterial species. They had altered patterns of immune activity in the gut. The changes were subtle. They were not dramatic enough to cause obvious symptoms in most cases, but they were real, and they were consistent, and they pointed toward a conclusion that the medical establishment was only slowly beginning to accept. The appendix was doing something. Its removal had consequences, and those consequences, while often masked by the robust compensatory mechanisms of the modern medical environment, were measurable and potentially significant. I want to pause here and acknowledge something important, because I do not want to create unnecessary anxiety. If you've had your appendix removed, you are almost certainly fine. The human body is remarkably resilient. The gut microbiome has multiple mechanisms for maintaining and restoring itself, and in the modern world with access to diverse diets, probiotics, clean water, and medical care, the loss of the appendix can be compensated for in most cases. The studies I am describing show statistical associations across large populations. They show trends, not destinies. Having your appendix removed does not condemn you to poor health any more than losing a spare tire condemns you to a flat. It increases a risk slightly under certain conditions in certain populations. That is all. So if you are lying here without your appendix, let that concern go. Let it drift away like a leaf on a stream. Your body has adapted. Your body is fine. And the story I am telling is not about fear. It is about wonder, about the slow, beautiful, humbling process of discovering that the body you live in is more complex and more carefully constructed than anyone imagined. Now, there is another dimension of the appendix story that I want to explore, and it takes us in a direction that might seem unexpected. I want to talk about the appendix and the brain. Specifically, I want to talk about the gut-brain axis and the emerging evidence that the gut microbiome, the very microbiome that the appendix protects, has a profound and direct influence on brain function, mood, behavior, and mental health. This is one of the most exciting and rapidly developing areas of biological research, and it is changing the way we think about the relationship between the body and the mind. For centuries, Western medicine and philosophy have treated the body and the mind as separate entities. The mind was in the brain. The body was everything else. The brain controlled the body. The body served the brain. The relationship was hierarchical and one-directional, brain to body, command to execution, mind over matter. But the gut-brain axis tells a different story. It tells a story of two-way communication, of constant dialogue between the gut and the brain, carried by nerves and hormones and immune signals and the metabolic products of bacteria. The gut talks to the brain talks to the gut, and the bacteria in the gut, the trillions of microorganisms that make up the microbiome, are active participants in this conversation. They are not just passengers in the gut. They are not just digesting food and producing vitamins. They are producing neurotransmitters, the chemical messengers that the brain uses to regulate mood, emotion, cognition, and behavior. Approximately 95% of the body's serotonin, the neurotransmitter most commonly associated with feelings of well-being and happiness, is produced not in the brain but in the gut. The gut bacteria play a direct role in this production. They also produce gamma-aminobutyric acid, known as GABA, a neurotransmitter that inhibits neural activity and promotes calmness and relaxation. They produce dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with reward and motivation. They produce acetylcholine, which plays a role in memory and learning. The gut is not just a digestive organ, it is a neuroactive organ. It is a second brain, connected to the first brain by the vagus nerve, the longest cranial nerve in the body, which runs from the brainstem all the way down to the abdomen and carries signals in both directions. And the composition of the gut microbiome, the specific mix of bacterial species present, directly affects the signals that are sent along this gut-brain axis. Studies in mice have shown that animals raised in germ-free conditions, without any gut bacteria at all, exhibit altered behavior, including increased anxiety, reduced social interaction, and impaired stress responses. When these germ-free mice are colonized with normal gut bacteria, their behavior normalizes. The bacteria change the brain, not metaphorically, literally. The chemical signals produced by gut bacteria cross the blood-brain barrier and interact with neural circuits that regulate emotion and behavior. In humans, the evidence is still accumulating, but the direction is clear. Studies have found correlations between the composition of the gut microbiome and the incidence of depression, anxiety, autism spectrum disorder, and other neurological and psychiatric conditions. Clinical trials of probiotic supplements, sometimes called psychobiotics when they are used specifically for mental health applications, have shown modest but measurable improvements in symptoms of depression and anxiety in some patient populations. The gut microbiome is not the only factor in mental health, and it would be a gross oversimplification to suggest that all mental health problems can be solved by fixing the gut. But the gut is a factor. The bacteria are players. And the conversation between the gut and the brain is real and significant. And the appendix protects this conversation by maintaining a reserve of beneficial gut bacteria, by ensuring that the microbiome can be rapidly restored after a disruption, by supporting the immune tissue that keeps the microbial community in balance. The appendix is indirectly contributing to the health of the gut-brain axis. It is protecting not just your digestion, it is protecting the microbial community that helps regulate your mood, your stress response, your emotional well-being. The appendix, that small finger-shaped pouch that Darwin called useless, is part of the system that keeps your brain healthy. The body is not a collection of independent parts. It is a web, a network, a system of systems, each one connected to every other, each one influencing and being influenced by the rest. The appendix connects to the microbiome. The microbiome connects to the immune system. The immune system connects to the gut-brain axis. The gut-brain axis connects to mood and cognition and behavior. Pull on any thread and the whole web vibrates. Remove any piece and the reverberations spread outward in ways that are difficult to predict and may take years to become apparent. This is the lesson of the appendix. Not just that it has a function, but that its function is embedded in a network of relationships so complex, so deeply interconnected, that understanding any single part requires understanding the whole. Let your thoughts become slow and loose now. Let them float like clouds in a wide sky, drifting wherever they want to go. The story does not need your concentration, it needs only your presence. Just be here. Just listen. The rest will take care of itself. I want to take you now into a slightly different territory. I want to talk about what the appendix tells us about the nature of evolution itself, because the story of the appendix challenges some common assumptions about how evolution works that are worth examining. The most common image of evolution, the one that most people carry in their minds, is a ladder. A progression from simple to complex, from primitive to advanced, from lower to higher. Fish become amphibians. Amphibians become reptiles. Reptiles become mammals. Mammals become primates. Primates become humans. Each step is an improvement on the last. Each new form is better, smarter, more sophisticated than its predecessor. Evolution is progress. Evolution is advancement. Evolution is climbing the ladder towards some ultimate destination, and humans are at the top. This image is wrong. It is profoundly, fundamentally, seductively wrong. And the appendix is one of the reasons we can see that it is wrong. Evolution is not a ladder, it is a bush. A sprawling, tangled, endlessly branching bush, with no top and no bottom, no direction and no destination. Every living species is equally evolved. Every bacterium, every fungus, every plant, every animal alive today has been shaped by the same number of years of evolution, roughly 4 billion years since life first appeared on Earth. Humans are not more evolved than chimpanzees. Chimpanzees are not more evolved than earthworms. Earthworms are not more evolved than bacteria. Each is adapted to its own environment. Each has been shaped by natural selection to solve the specific problems of its specific ecological niche. The idea that evolution is heading somewhere, that it has a goal, that it is trying to produce humans or intelligence or complexity, is a projection of human ego onto a process that has no ego, no plan, no intention of any kind. And the appendix illustrates this beautifully. The appendix is not a step on a ladder. It is not a relic of a simpler past being gradually eliminated in favor of a more advanced present. It is a living, functional, actively maintained organ that has been independently invented by evolution dozens of times in species as different from each other as koalas and orangutans and rabbits and beavers. It is not trending toward disappearance. It is trending toward persistence. Evolution is not trying to get rid of it. Evolution is keeping it, because it works. And the reason it works is not because it is complex or sophisticated or advanced. It is because it is simple. The appendix is a pouch, a small, blind-ended tube lined with immune tissue, housing a community of bacteria in a biofilm. That is it. No moving parts, no intricate molecular machinery, just a pouch. And this pouch solves a problem that every mammalian gut faces, the problem of maintaining a microbial community in the face of periodic disruption, so effectively and so efficiently that evolution has independently hit upon the same solution 32 times. This is what evolution does. It does not strive for complexity, it does not aim for elegance, it does not aspire to beauty. It finds solutions. Simple, effective, good enough solutions to the problems that organisms face in their specific environments. Sometimes those solutions are complex, like the human brain or the immune system. Sometimes they are simple, like the appendix. But complexity is not the goal. Function is the goal. Survival is the goal. And the appendix, in its humble simplicity, has been achieving that goal for tens of millions of years. There is something deeply reassuring about this. In a world that often seems to value complexity over simplicity, sophistication over functionality, the appendix is a reminder that the simplest solutions are often the best. A pouch of bacteria in a protected corner of the intestine. That is all it takes to protect the microbial community that keeps the body healthy. No artificial intelligence, no nanotechnology, no pharmaceutical intervention. Just a pouch, maintained by millions of years of evolution, quietly doing its job in the dark interior of your abdomen while you sleep. And while we are on the subject of sleep, let me tell you something about the relationship between sleep and the gut microbiome, because it connects to the story we have been telling and is particularly relevant to you right now, lying here in the dark, drifting toward rest. The gut microbiome has its own circadian rhythm. The populations of different bacterial species in your gut fluctuate over the course of the day, rising and falling in patterns that are synchronized with your sleep-wake cycle. Some species are more active during the day, others are more active at night. The overall metabolic output of the microbiome, the cocktail of chemicals and signaling molecules it produces, changes in a daily rhythm that mirrors and interacts with the body's own circadian clock. And sleep disruption, poor sleep quality, insufficient sleep duration, irregular sleep patterns disrupts this microbial rhythm. Studies have shown that sleep deprivation alters the composition of the gut microbiome, reducing the populations of certain beneficial species and increasing the populations of others associated with inflammation and metabolic dysfunction. Shift workers, who regularly disrupt their circadian rhythms, have been shown to have altered gut microbiomes compared to people who maintain regular sleep schedules. And the altered microbiome, in turn, affects the body's inflammatory response, metabolic function, and even cognitive performance. This creates a feedback loop. Poor sleep disrupts the microbiome. A disrupted microbiome impairs the production of neurotransmitters that promote good sleep. The impaired neurotransmitter production leads to poorer sleep, and poorer sleep further disrupts the microbiome. The gut and the brain, connected by the vagus nerve and the chemical messengers of the gut-brain axis, spiral together, each one pulling the other in the direction of dysfunction. But the loop works in the positive direction too. Good sleep supports a healthy microbiome. A healthy microbiome supports the production of neurotransmitters that promote good sleep. The gut and the brain, working together, support each other in a virtuous cycle of rest and restoration. And the appendix, by protecting the diversity and resilience of the gut microbiome, is quietly contributing to this cycle. It is protecting your sleep, not directly, not in an obvious or dramatic way, but through the intricate web of connections that links the appendix to the microbiome, to the gut-brain axis, to the neural circuits that regulate sleep and wakefulness. So as you lie here tonight, drifting toward rest, know that the organ that evolution refused to delete is working for you. Right now, in the dark. While you sleep, maintaining its bacterial reserve, supporting your immune system, protecting the microbial community that produces the serotonin and GABA and other neurotransmitters that are, at this very moment, helping you fall asleep. The body is extraordinary, not because it is perfect. It is not perfect. It is full of compromises and trade-offs and kludgy solutions that work well enough without being elegant. But it is extraordinary because every part of it, every cell, every organ, every system, is connected to every other part in a web of relationships so intricate, so deeply integrated, that changing any one thing changes everything. And the appendix, that humble, misunderstood, unfairly maligned organ, is part of that web. A small part, a quiet part, but a part that matters. Now, I want to take you to one more place before we continue onward through the night, because there is an aspect of this story that we have not yet explored, and it connects the appendix to something much larger, something that touches on the deepest questions of what it means to be a living organism in a world shaped by billions of years of evolution. I want to talk about the concept of holobiont. This is a term that has been gaining traction in biological science over the past decade, and it refers to the idea that a complex organism like a human being is not a single entity, but a community. A holobiont is the combination of a host organism and all of the microorganisms that live in and on it, considered as a single ecological unit. You are not just you. You are you. Thus your bacteria, your fungi, your viruses, your archaea, your protists, all of the microscopic life forms that inhabit your body and that are as essential to your functioning as your own cells. This idea challenges the traditional view of the organism as a discrete, bounded, self-contained individual. In the traditional view, you are the sum of your human cells. Your bacteria are passengers, hitchhikers, tenants at best. They live in your body, but they are not part of your body. They are separate entities, distinct from you, occupying your territory, but not contributing to your identity. The holobiont concept says otherwise. It says that the boundary between you and your microbiome is not a wall, but a membrane. It is permeable, it is fluid. The bacteria in your gut are producing chemicals that cross into your bloodstream and affect your brain. Your immune system is producing molecules that shape the composition of the bacterial community. Your genes and the genes of your microbiome are co-evolved, adapted to each other over millions of years of shared history. You cannot fully understand the human organism by studying human cells alone. You need to study the whole community, the holobiont, the superorganism, the collaboration between human and microbial that produces the entity you experience as yourself. And the appendix is the organ of the holobiont. It is the organ that maintains the partnership, that protects the microbial partner, that ensures the continuity of the collaboration across disruptions and crises and the ordinary challenges of daily life. The appendix is not just a human organ, it is an organ of the relationship between humans and bacteria. It exists at the interface, serving both partners, maintaining the balance that both depend on. It is, in a sense, the organ of cooperation itself. This is a profound reframing. It changes the appendix from a useless vestige to a symbol of one of the deepest truths in biology, the truth that life is not about individual organisms competing in isolation. Life is about relationships, about partnerships, about the endless, intricate, beautiful web of cooperation that connects every living thing on Earth to every other living thing. The bacteria in your gut are not your enemies, they are your partners, and the appendix is the organ that protects the partnership. There is a saying in ecology that everything is connected to everything else. This is not just a platitude. It is a literal description of how biological systems work. The appendix connects to the microbiome. The microbiome connects to the immune system. The immune system connects to the gut-brain axis. The gut-brain axis connects to mood and cognition and sleep. Sleep connects to circadian rhythms. Circadian rhythms connect to metabolism. Metabolism connects to the microbiome. And round it goes, each system influencing every other system. Each part of the body connected to every other part through a web of relationships that is so complex, so deeply layered, that no single study, no single experiment, no single career can fully map it. And at the center of this web, quietly doing its job, maintaining its bacterial reserve, supporting its immune tissue, protecting the microbial partnership that makes you, is the appendix. The organ that evolution refused to delete. The organ that science called useless for 150 years. The organ that turned out to be one of the most important and most frequently reinvented structures in the entire history of mammalian evolution. Your body is a wonder. Every cell, every organ, every system, every bacterium, every chemical signal flowing through the dark interior of your physical self is part of a story that stretches back billions of years to the first single-celled organism that divided in the warm seas of a young planet, to the first multicellular life that began to cooperate, to the first animals that developed guts and immune systems and nervous systems, to the first mammals that developed abentices to protect the bacterial partners they depended on. You were the latest chapter in that story. And the appendix, sitting quietly in the lower right corner of your abdomen, is one of the oldest sentences in it, written hundreds of millions of years ago and still being read by every cell in your body tonight. If this story is making you see your body differently, if it is making you appreciate the quiet complexity of the organism you inhabit, if it is making you wonder what other mysteries might be hiding in the structures you have always taken for granted, then I am glad. That wonder is the point, not the facts, though the facts are extraordinary, not the science, though the science is compelling. The wonder, the quiet, humbling, awe-inspiring wonder of being alive in a body that has been shaped by forces operating on timescales that dwarf any human life, any human civilization, any human comprehension. You are a 4 billion-year-old experiment in living. And you are magnificent. Let the wonder carry you now. Let it be the current that moves you towards sleep. The night is deep. The story is deep. And your body, that ancient, complex, deeply functional, endlessly surprising body, is doing what it has always done. Breathing, digesting, pumping blood, fighting pathogens, maintaining its bacterial partnerships, protecting its reserves, preparing for tomorrow. All of this, all of it, happening without your conscious involvement, without your awareness, without your permission. Your body does not need you to supervise it. It has been doing this for a very long time. It knows what it is doing. And tonight, as you drift towards sleep, you can trust it completely. It has earned that trust. Over billions of years. One small, persistent, stubbornly surviving appendix at a time. The night has grown deep around you now. The kind of deep that has weight to it, that presses gently on the edges of everything, softening the world into something quieter, something slower, something more forgiving than the bright, sharp hours of the day. You have travelled far through this story, through millions of years of evolution, through the history of an organ that refused to disappear, through the intricate web of relationships that connects every cell in your body to every bacterium in your gut, to every signal travelling along the vagus nerve to the distant, dreaming chambers of your brain. And now, as the story moves toward its close, I want to take you somewhere else, somewhere that might seem unexpected, somewhere that connects everything we have discussed to the deepest questions about what it means to be alive, to be human, to be a body lying in the dark, breathing, resting, preparing to dissolve into sleep. I want to talk about time, not the time on the clock beside your bed, not the time that schedules your days and structures your obligations. I want to talk about deep time, evolutionary time, the vast, incomprehensible stretches of duration that separate you from the first fish that crawled onto land, from the first mammal that evolved an appendix, from the first human who looked up at the stars and wondered what they were. Because the story of the appendix is not just a story about an organ, it is a story about time, about what persists across time, about what survives the relentless, patient, indifferent editing of natural selection across hundreds of millions of years. And understanding that story, really understanding it, requires a shift in perspective that is difficult to achieve but profoundly rewarding when it happens. Let your body continue to soften. Let the bed hold you completely, supporting every curve and angle of your physical form. You do not need to hold yourself up anymore. You do not need to maintain any tension. The surface beneath you is doing all the work, and your only job is to let go. Let go a little more with each breath. The story will continue, the night will continue, and you will drift, slowly, gently, inevitably, toward the rest that is waiting for you. Here is something that is almost impossible for the human mind to truly grasp. The appendix in your body tonight is connected through an unbroken chain of parent and offspring, cell division after cell division, generation after generation, to an appendix-like structure that existed in a mammal that lived over 80 million years ago. Not a copy of that structure, not a design based on that structure. The actual, physical, biological continuation of that structure, modified and refined over the intervening millions of years, but never disconnected, never starting over from scratch, always continuous, always linked by the thread of heredity that connects every living thing to every other living thing that has ever lived. Think about what that means. 80 million years ago, a small furry creature, something like a shrew, was living in the shadow of the dinosaurs. And inside that creature's abdomen was a pouch of tissue at the junction of the small and large intestine, lined with immune cells, housing a community of bacteria. That creature reproduced. Its offspring inherited the pouch. Those offspring reproduced. Their offspring inherited the pouch. And so on, generation after generation across millions of generations, through the extinction of the dinosaurs, through the rise of the mammals, through the emergence of the primates, through the evolution of the apes, through the appearance of the first humans, through the appearance of the first humans, through the development of language and culture and civilization, through the invention of writing and agriculture and cities and science, all the way down to you. The appendix in your body is not a new appendix. It is an old appendix, ancient, unimaginably ancient, carried forward through time by the simple, mechanical, astonishing process of biological inheritance. And here is the thing about evolution that the appendix teaches us. Evolution is not just about change. It is also about persistence. It is about the things that survive, the things that endure, The things that prove so useful, so well adapted, so deeply integrated into the functioning of the organism that they are maintained across timescales that dwarf any human conception of duration. The appendix has been part of the mammalian body plan for longer than there have been primates, longer than there have been flowers, longer than there have been grasses. It predates the Himalayan mountains. It predates the Mediterranean Sea. It predates the separation of Africa from South America. The appendix is older than geography, and it is still here, still functioning, still doing its job in the body of every human being on Earth. This is what evolution means when it decides to keep something. It means keeping it across cataclysms and ice ages and mass extinctions and continental drift. It means keeping it through changes in climate, changes in diet, changes in lifestyle, changes in every aspect of the organism's existence. It means keeping it so tenaciously, so persistently, so stubbornly, that the structure becomes a kind of anchor, a fixed point in the churning sea of evolutionary change, something that remains constant while everything else transforms around it. The appendix is such an anchor. It is held fast while the mammals diversified into thousands of species. It is held fast while primates evolved larger brains and smaller jaws and upright posture. It has held fast while humans spread across the globe and invented agriculture and built cities and developed medicine. Through all of it, the appendix endured, because evolution decided it was worth keeping. And this brings me to a question that I find deeply moving, a question that connects the appendix to the largest themes of human existence. What else in you has that kind of persistence? What else in the body you inhabit tonight has survived the same journey through deep time, anchored by evolution, maintained across millions of years because it proved too valuable to lose? The answer is almost everything. Your heart pumping blood through your body right now is a variation on a design that first appeared in fish over 500 million years ago. Your eyes, closed in the darkness, are built on a plan that originated in the earliest animals with light-sensitive cells. Your nervous system, carrying the signals that will soon carry you into sleep, is an elaboration of a network that first appeared in creatures so simple they did not even have brains. Every system in your body, every organ, every tissue, every cell is a survivor, a champion of persistence, a winner of the longest competition in the history of life, the competition to continue existing across time. You are not a new invention. You are an old story. A very old story. A story that has been told and retold generation after generation for billions of years. And the appendix, that small finger-shaped pouch in the lower right corner of your abdomen, is one of the sentences in that story. A sentence that was written over 80 million years ago and that is still being spoken tonight, in the language of cells and bacteria and immune signals and the quiet, ceaseless work of biological maintenance. Let that thought rest in you like a stone settling to the bottom of a still pond. You are ancient, not metaphorically, literally. The matter you are made of is billions of years old. The atoms in your body were forged in the hearts of dying stars. The water in your cells has cycled through clouds and oceans and glaciers and rivers for eons. And the biological structures that organize that matter into a living, breathing, thinking human being have been refined and perfected across timescales that the human mind cannot truly comprehend. You are not a new thing. You are the latest expression of a very old thing, and that old thing is beautiful. Now, I want to circle back to something I mentioned earlier and explore it more deeply, because it connects to the experience you are having right now. The experience of lying in the dark, listening to a voice, feeling your body relax, preparing to sleep. I want to talk about the relationship between the appendix, the microbiome, and the act of sleeping itself. Sleep is not passive. This is one of the most important discoveries of modern sleep science, and it contradicts the intuitive sense that sleep is simply the absence of waking, a blank space, a void, a nothingness that separates one day from the next. Sleep is active. Sleep is busy. Sleep is a time when the brain and body are engaged in essential maintenance work that cannot be done during waking hours: memory consolidation, cellular repair, hormone regulation, immune system calibration, toxin clearance, growth, healing. All of this happens during sleep, and all of it is essential for health, for cognitive function, for emotional regulation, for the ability to wake up tomorrow and engage with the world. And the gut microbiome is part of this process. The bacteria in your gut do not sleep, not in the way you sleep, but their activity follows a circadian rhythm that is synchronized with your sleep-wake cycle. During the night while you rest, the gut microbiome shifts into a different mode of operation. Different bacterial species become more active. Different metabolic processes take precedence. The chemical output of the microbiome changes, and these changes influence the chemical environment of the entire body, including the brain. The neurotransmitters produced by the gut microbiome, the serotonin and GABA and dopamine that I mentioned earlier, are involved in the regulation of sleep. Serotonin is a precursor to melatonin, the hormone that promotes sleep onset. GABA inhibits neural activity and promotes relaxation. The gut microbiome is not just passively present during sleep, it is actively contributing to the process, producing the chemical signals that help the brain transition from waking to sleeping, that help the body relax, that help the mind let go of the concerns of the day and drift into the restorative depths of rest. And the appendix, by protecting the gut microbiome, is protecting this process. Every night when you sleep, the appendix is part of the system that makes sleep possible. Not the most important part, not the central part, but a part, a contributor, a silent partner in the nightly ritual of rest and restoration that keeps you healthy, keeps you sane, keeps you able to face another day. If you want to support the channel that brought you this story tonight, there is a small, quiet thing you can do. Just tap the subscribe button and the bell beside it. That way, the next time a story like this appears, it will find its way to you, a gentle notification waiting when you need something to carry you into sleep. Think of it as leaving a light on in a window you might want to return to. Now, I want to tell you about one more aspect of the appendix story, one that I find particularly beautiful because it connects the organ to the deepest layers of human culture and meaning. I want to talk about the appendix and the concept of redundancy. In engineering, redundancy is a design principle. It means building backup systems into a structure so that if one system fails, another can take over. Airplanes have redundant control systems. Spacecraft have redundant computers. Power grids have redundant transmission lines. Redundancy is not waste. It is insurance. It is the recognition that in a complex, unpredictable world, the things that matter most need to be protected by backup systems that can maintain function when the primary system is compromised. The appendix is biological redundancy. It is the body's backup system for the gut microbiome, and the existence of this backup system tells us something profound about the importance of the microbiome to the organism. Evolution does not build backup systems for things that do not matter. Evolution does not invest metabolic resources in maintaining a reserve supply of something that the organism can easily do without. The fact that the appendix exists, the fact that it has evolved independently at least 32 times, the fact that it has been maintained across millions of years of evolution is a testament to the critical importance of the gut microbiome. The appendix exists because losing the microbiome, even temporarily, was so dangerous to our ancestors that natural selection built a backup system to prevent it. And here is where the story becomes even more interesting, because the appendix is not the only backup system in the human body. The human body is full of redundancy. 2 kidneys, when one would suffice for basic survival. 2 lungs, when significant portions of lung tissue can be lost without fatal consequences. 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 hemispheres of the brain, each capable of compensating to some degree for damage to the other. The liver can regenerate from a small fraction of its original mass. The bone marrow can repopulate the entire blood system from a small surviving population of stem cells. Redundancy is built into the architecture of the human body at every level, from the macroscopic scale of organs down to the molecular scale of DNA repair mechanisms. Why? Why did evolution invest so heavily in redundancy when it is supposed to be such a ruthless editor, such an efficient eliminator of waste and excess? The answer is that redundancy is not waste. Redundancy is survival. In a dangerous, unpredictable world, the organisms that survive are not the ones that are most streamlined, most efficient, most perfectly optimized for a single set of conditions. The organisms that survive are the ones that can absorb damage, that can recover from setbacks, that can maintain function when things go wrong. Redundancy is the difference between a system that works perfectly under ideal conditions and a system that works adequately under a wide range of conditions, including conditions that are far from ideal. And in the real world, conditions are rarely ideal. Injuries happen, infections happen, famines happen, disasters happen. The organisms that survive are the ones with backup systems, the ones that can take a hit and keep going, the ones that have reserves to draw on when the primary system fails. The appendix is one of those reserves, and its presence in your body tonight is a reminder that evolution has been preparing you for adversity for millions of years, long before you were born, long before your species existed, long before the mammals rose to prominence. Evolution was building backup systems into the bodies of your ancestors, anticipating the inevitable challenges and setbacks of life in a dangerous world. The appendix is not a remnant of the past. It is a preparation for the future. It is evolution's way of saying, I know things will go wrong. I have made provisions. There is something deeply comforting about this. The idea that your body has been designed, across millions of years of evolutionary refinement, to handle adversity, to recover from setbacks, to maintain function when things go wrong. You are not fragile. You are resilient. You are the product of a design process that has been stress testing organisms against every conceivable challenge for billions of years, and only the ones that could survive those challenges made it through. You are the descendant of survivors. Every one of your ancestors, stretching back to the first single-celled organism that divided in the ancient seas, survived long enough to reproduce. Not one of them died before passing on their genes. Not one. An unbroken chain of survival, stretching back 4 billion years, and you are the latest link. Let that thought settle into your bones. You come from a long line of survivors. Your body knows how to handle difficulty. It has been handling difficulty for longer than mountains have existed. And tonight, as you rest, as you sleep, as you let go of the day's concerns and drift into the healing darkness, your body will continue to handle difficulty. It will repair damaged cells. It will fight off pathogens. It will consolidate memories and regulate hormones and maintain the delicate balance of the microbiome. All of this will happen without your conscious involvement. Your body does not need your supervision. It has been doing this for a very long time. You can trust it. You can rest. Now, as we move toward the end of this journey, I want to offer you a reflection, a thought to carry with you as you cross the threshold into sleep, and it is this. The story of the appendix is a story about humility, about the humility that comes from realizing that the natural world is more complex, more intricate, more deeply functional than we can easily understand. For over a century, the smartest people in the world, the doctors and scientists and researchers who dedicated their lives to understanding the human body, were wrong about the appendix, not because they were foolish, not because they were careless, but because the systems they were studying were so complex, so interconnected, so deeply layered, that their tools and their conceptual frameworks were not adequate to the task of understanding them. They saw the appendix. They dissected it, measured it, examined it under microscopes, studied its tissue, mapped its blood supply, and they still got it wrong. Because they could not see the microbiome. They could not see the gut-brain axis. They could not see the intricate web of relationships that connects the appendix to every other system in the body. This is not a failure of intelligence. It is a limitation of knowledge, and it is a limitation that applies to everything we think we understand about the world. Every piece of scientific knowledge we possess is provisional. Every theory, every model, every explanation is a best guess based on the evidence currently available. And as new evidence emerges, as new tools and techniques allow us to see things we could not see before, our understanding changes. Sometimes it deepens, sometimes it reverses, sometimes it reveals that we were wrong about things we thought we knew for certain. This is humbling, but it is also liberating, because it means that the world is always more interesting than we think it is. There are always more discoveries to be made, more mysteries to be solved, more surprises waiting in the structures we have looked at 1,000 times without really seeing. The appendix was hiding in plain sight for 150 years, performing a function that no one suspected, participating in a system that no one understood. And if that was true of the appendix, what else might be true? What other structures in a human body might be performing functions we have not yet discovered? What other relationships might be waiting to be revealed? The answer is almost certainly many. The history of biology is a history of discovering functions for things that were previously thought to be functionless. The history of medicine is a history of revising beliefs that were previously thought to be certain. And the future of both fields will undoubtedly contain more revisions, more discoveries, more moments when the scientific community has to confront the fact that something it was sure about turned out to be wrong. This is not a reason for cynicism. It is not a reason to distrust science. Science is still the best tool we have for understanding the world. It is still the method that has given us antibiotics and vaccines and surgical techniques and all the other advances that have doubled human lifespan in the past century. But science is a process, not a destination. It is a method for getting closer to the truth, not a claim to have arrived at the truth. And the story of the appendix is a beautiful illustration of that process in action. A structure that was misunderstood for over a century, a function that was hidden by the limitations of technology and conceptual frameworks, a gradual accumulation of evidence that something was wrong, a new hypothesis that explained the evidence, a shift in understanding that is still unfolding today. This is how science works, slowly, imperfectly, with many wrong turns and dead ends, but inexorably toward a better understanding of the world. And you, lying here tonight, are the beneficiary of that process. The knowledge you have received in this story, the understanding of the appendix as a safe house for beneficial bacteria, as an immune organ, as a protector of the gut microbiome, as a guardian of the holobiont, this knowledge did not exist a generation ago. It is new. It is the product of research conducted in the past 20 years using tools that did not exist before that. And it has changed the way that medicine understands your body. Fewer healthy appendixes are being removed now than in the past. The conversation about vestigial structures has shifted. The appreciation of the gut microbiome has transformed medicine in ways that are still unfolding. All of this is the result of science working the way it is supposed to work, questioning its own assumptions, following the evidence wherever it leads, being willing to admit when it has been wrong. You are living in the most scientifically sophisticated era in human history. And one of the things that sophistication has revealed is that your body is more sophisticated than science itself. The appendix, that humble pouch that was dismissed as useless for 150 years, has turned out to be a window into a world of complexity that we are only beginning to understand. The gut microbiome, the gut-brain axis, the holobiont, the relationship between sleep and microbial activity, the role of redundancy and biological resilience. All of these are active areas of research. All of them are revealing new surprises every year, and all of them are connected to that small, finger-shaped organ in the lower right corner of your abdomen. Your body is a mystery, not a solved problem, not a machine with fully understood parts. A mystery. Something that reveals new depths the closer you look, something that rewards curiosity with wonder, something that has been shaped by forces operating on timescales that dwarf any human conception, and that has arrived at solutions that are elegant, efficient, and still not fully understood. And tonight, as you fall asleep, that mystery is working. Every cell in your body is engaged in processes that science is still mapping. Every organ is performing functions that science is still discovering. Every bacterium in your gut is participating in a community that science is still learning to understand. You do not need to understand it. You do not need to supervise it. You just need to rest. The mystery knows what it is doing. It has been doing it for a very long time, and it will continue to do it while you sleep, while you dream, while you drift through the quiet hours of the night toward the morning that is waiting on the other side. If this story has changed the way you see your body, if it has given you a new appreciation for the quiet complexity of the organism you inhabit, I want you to know that there are more stories like this. More journeys into the hidden functions of the human body, the forgotten chapters of human history, the deep structures that connect every living thing to every other living thing. And if you want to be part of those journeys, leave a comment when you wake up. Tell me what part of this story surprised you the most. Tell me what you want to know more about. Those comments are not just feedback. They are the beginning of a conversation and may help other people find these stories when they need something to carry them gently into the dark. Now, the story is almost over. The night is deep. The journey through millions of years of evolution, through the quiet persistence of the appendix, through the intricate web of relationships that connects your gut to your brain, to your immune system, to your sleep, is coming to an end. And I want to leave you with one final thought. A thought to carry with you across the threshold into sleep. A thought to rest in, like a boat resting in a calm harbour. You are part of something larger than yourself. Not metaphorically, literally. The bacteria in your gut are part of you, and you are part of them. You are a holobiont, a community, a collaboration between human cells and microbial cells that has been refined over millions of years of evolution. And this community extends beyond your body. The bacteria in your gut came from somewhere. They came from the food you eat, the water you drink, the air you breathe, the people you touch, the environments you inhabit. They are a thread connecting you to every other living thing on Earth. The same bacterial species that live in your gut live in the guts of people on the other side of the world. The same microbial communities that maintain your health maintain the health of ecosystems, of soils, of oceans, of forests. You are not separate from the natural world. You are continuous with it. You are made of it, and it is made of you. The appendix, that small organ that evolution refused to delete, is a reminder of this continuity. It exists because bacteria exist. It evolved to protect a partnership that has been essential to mammalian life for over 100 million years. And every night, when you sleep, that partnership continues. The bacteria do their work. The appendix does its work. The immune system does its work. And you rest held by a web of relationships that stretches back to the beginning of life on Earth and forward to every living thing that will ever exist. You are connected. You are part of something. You are not alone in the universe, not even close. You are surrounded, permeated, inhabited and supported by a community of life that has been with you since before you were born and that will continue after you are gone. The bacteria in your gut will return to the soil. The atoms in your body will be recycled into new forms of life. The patterns of organization that make you will dissolve back into the vast flow of matter and energy that has been cycling through life for 4 billion years. And something of you will persist. Not your memories, not your personality, but the patterns, the solutions, the adaptations that worked, including the appendix, will be carried forward into the future by the organisms that inherit them. This is a kind of immortality. Not personal immortality, not the continuation of your individual consciousness beyond death, but biological immortality. The immortality of the patterns that worked. The immortality of the solutions that evolution discovered and decided to keep. The appendix has that kind of immortality. It has been passed down through millions of generations. It will continue to be passed down through millions more. And some small part of you, some echo of the patterns that make you who you are, will be part of that continuation. This is not a sad thought. It is a peaceful thought. A thought that places your individual existence in a larger context. A context that is vast and ancient and ongoing. You are a wave in an ocean that has been rolling for 4 billion years, and when your wave subsides, the ocean continues. The patterns continue. The life continues, and the appendix, that small, persistent, stubbornly surviving organ, continues with it. Let your breathing slow now. Let each breath be longer and deeper than the last. Let the air fill your lungs and then release, carrying with it any remaining tension, any remaining thought, any remaining resistance to the sleep that is waiting for you. The story is over. The journey is complete. You have traveled through deep time, through the history of an organ, through the web of relationships that connects every living thing, and now there is nothing left to do but rest. The room around you is quiet. The world outside is quiet. The night is holding you in its vast, dark, patient embrace. And somewhere in the lower right corner of your abdomen, the appendix is doing what it has always done, maintaining its bacterial reserve, supporting its immune tissue, protecting the partnership that keeps you healthy. It does not know that you have just spent hours learning about it. It does not know that its story has been told. It just does its job, quietly, persistently, the way it has been doing for over 80 million years, the way it will continue to do for as long as mammals exist on this planet. Evolution tried to delete this from your body for millions of years. It failed, and you are the beneficiary of that failure. You carry within you an organ that has survived the test of deep time, that has proven its worth across cataclysms and extinctions and transformations that reshaped the surface of the earth. You carry a survivor. You carry a champion. You carry a small finger-shaped testament to the power of persistence, to the value of redundancy, to the importance of protecting the partnerships that make life possible. And now, carrying that knowledge, carrying that wonder, carrying that sense of connection to the vast, ancient, ongoing story of life on Earth, you can let go, you can release the day, you can release the thoughts, you can release the effort of staying awake. There is nothing more you need to do, nothing more you need to think about, nothing more you need to understand. Just rest. The appendix will take care of itself. The microbiome will take care of itself. Your body will take care of itself, the way it has been taking care of itself for your entire life, the way it has been taking care of organisms like you for millions of years. You can trust the process. You can trust the ancient, patient, deeply functional systems that are operating right now in the quiet interior of your body. They do not need your supervision. They do not need your concern. They just need you to rest. So rest now. Let the darkness wrap around you like a blanket. Let the silence settle over you like snow falling on a windless night. Let the weight of your body sink into the surface beneath you, heavy and warm and completely supported. There is nothing to do, nowhere to go, no one to be. Just this moment, just this breath, just this gradual, gentle, inevitable surrender to the sleep that has been waiting for you all along. The story has ended. The night continues, and somewhere in the vast, quiet, ancient depths of your body, the appendix holds its reserve of bacteria. The gut microbiome hums with quiet activity. The immune system patrols its borders, and every system works together in a collaboration that has been refined over billions of years to keep you alive, to keep you healthy, to keep you capable of waking up tomorrow and doing whatever tomorrow requires. But that is tomorrow, and tomorrow is far away. Right now, there is only the night, only the breath, only the slow, sweet dissolution of waking into sleeping, of tension into release, of the busy, complicated person you are during the day into the simple, resting body you become in the dark. Sleep now. Sleep deeply. Sleep well. The appendix is watching over you. The microbiome is watching over you. 4 billion years of evolution is watching over you. And in the morning when you wake, you will carry within you the same ancient, persistent, stubbornly surviving organ that you carried into this night. The organ that evolution tried to delete and failed. The organ that science called useless and was wrong. The organ that is, right now, doing its quiet, essential, remarkable work in the lower right corner of your abdomen. You are more complex than you know, more ancient than you imagine, more connected than you ever suspected, and you are ready to sleep. So close your eyes if they are not already closed. Let your mind grow quiet. Let your thoughts drift away like clouds dispersing after a storm, and let the deep, patient, healing darkness of the night carry you wherever you need to go. Good night. Rest well. Your body has been doing this for a very long time. Trust it. It knows the way.